Hello there, my name is Derek Mitchell, and I want to thank you for joining me. I'm talking today about low-carb diet. Why would you want to go on a low-carb diet? Well, first of all, it's going to help you with your health. It's going to help you with possibly if you have a need to lose weight. That's a lot of the reason people use the low-carb process. What you need to think about is you're going to eliminate certain things from your diet, but you're also going to be able to eat without having to worry about specifically worry about the amount of calories at first. You want to keep track of them later on, but you don't want to focus on those. So what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate all the food you're eating. You're going to eat only certain types of food, but you're going to have a lot of foods that you really enjoy, and you're going to enjoy and you feel satisfied. So you're not going to feel like you're needing to eat all the time. One of the things I will do in a future video is talk about ways to combine low-carb eating with the possibility of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is where there's a number of different ways you can do intermittent fasting, but the one way is to stretch out the period of time where you don't eat, and then you'll have a very shortened eating window within each day. So as an example, you might stop eating at 8 p.m. each night, and then don't eat again until noon the next day. So you'll have noon till 8 p.m. to eat whatever you choose, and you're going to eat what you decided that will help you maintain and control your weight or lose weight. There are a lot of healthy things about the low-carb diet. The low-carb diet will provide foods that will improve your health from your heart aspect, your digestion. It's going to allow you time to heal because you're not going to eat as often. You will find that the foods that you eat should normally be relatively non-processed. You're going to eat things like meat, eggs, cheese. You're going to have, depending on the way you go about the low-carb diet, because there's more strict ways and less strict ways. One of the concepts of eating, and there's some diets out there similar. Some of them are called ketogenic. Some of them one of them is Atkins. Some of them, but they're all very similar in the concepts. They just differ in the approach and how you apply them to your life. So, as an example, you're going to eat meat, cheese, eggs. You won't eat much fruit during the first little while. I would suggest not eating any fruit during the first little while, first 2-3 weeks, maybe a month. You're going to keep all your carbohydrates that you do have, and you're going to try to, on a very low carb diet, you're going to try to limit them to under 20 grams per day. Some people suggest you look at the net carb calculation, which is essentially the carbs for that food minus any fiber that's in the food. So as an example, spinach, it might have 3 grams of fiber per serving, 3 grams of carbs per serving, and it might have 1 gram of fiber per serving. So that would be 2 net grams of fiber, of carbs for that particular food that you're eating. So you want to keep track of that, try to keep them under 20 for the day. What that will do is reduce the amount of insulin. In other words, it's not going to be secreting insulin from your pancreas, and therefore your blood glucose level is going to be much lower. And I think one of the things that people don't seem to, who haven't done these type of diets, don't seem to realize is that insulin secretion causes a lot of issues in the body if you have too much of it. So one thing you want to keep in mind, keep the carbs low, keep the insulin secretion low, keep the blood glucose low. With the blood glucose being low, it's going to allow your body to adapt, and they call it keto adaptation. It's going to adapt to a point where instead of using sugar or blood glucose to feed your body and your brain, it's going to start using something called ketones. Ketones are produced by the liver. When you do restrict the carbs, ketones can be created and can feed your brain, so you can run on ketones. You do not need blood glucose for that function. You don't need carbohydrates to that level. A lot of people will say nutrients. Oh, okay, I'm missing nutrients. Well, I can show you, and in the future I can show you different macros that show that the nutrients within the foods that you will eat in a low-carb diet are meet the daily requirements of nutrients in any diet. So just because you're not eating a lot of vegetables or fruit doesn't mean that you won't receive the amount of nutrients that you need in the diet. Plus, if you choose, you can supplement things that you think that you perceive may be missing, but I will tell you that there's not a lot that are missing from the diet. So a couple of things to remember. First of all, you're going to look at the different foods, and there's going to be a list that I'll attach to this video that shows the types of foods that you can eat and in a situation where you want to eat them. So things like fruit you're going to basically eliminate for the first little while. Vegetables you're going to keep to a minimum, and you won't have any starchy vegetables. Only vegetables you want to eat are things like broccoli, spinach, asparagus. There are others, but basically things that are non-starchy, you got to keep those to a minimum. You're not going to eat those all the time, and you're going to make sure that you keep track of the amount of carbohydrates in all the foods that you eat. A lot of meat will basically have no carbohydrates, but just one thing to keep in mind is when you see a label on any food that you eat, it might say 0 carbohydrates or 1 carbohydrate. Keep in mind that they have the right, when they're labeling, to, if it's less than a half of a gram, they're within their legal rights to only put 0 as the carbohydrate for that particular item if it's less than a half of a gram. So, or a half of a measure. So just keep that in mind. If you see a 0, it's not necessarily a 0. Artificial sweeteners. Now that's something a lot of people debate. I personally try to avoid them. I use stevia, or sometimes I use sucralose, but basically stevia is my main sweet item. I do add a lot of fats to this diet. When I have coffee in the morning, sometimes I'll add coconut oil to increase the fat. I'll mix it up in a blender so it's like a latte. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll try to eat things that are satisfying, that are a little bit different, so that it's not too boring when you're having this diet. Because sometimes you end up bacon and eggs, or sausage and eggs, pork chops and eggs, steak for dinner, chicken, lots of chicken. You want to have as good quality meats as you possibly can. If you have poor quality meats, that can affect the way that your body metabolizes the information and metabolizes the food that you're eating. But the more meat you have, you don't want to have too much protein in the day, so there are macros that you want to set. Essentially, you want to have about, ballparking here, 65 to 75% fat. 5% of the foods you eat should be carbohydrates, and those should come from vegetables and pretty much nothing else. You don't want processed carbs. So those specialty protein bars that say they're low in carbs, low in net carbs, you probably want to avoid those at least for the first little while till you get yourself into ketosis. And the rest would be protein. So you want to have maybe 20% to 25% protein. And the protein levels will be different for men and women, but you don't want to have excess amount of protein. There's a possibility, and it doesn't happen, I don't think, too often, but there is a possibility that if you do eat too much protein, it can take that protein, turn it into glucose, and that can cause an issue. But you really have to be eating excessive levels of protein on a regular basis for that to happen. Okay, so I hope I've not been talking too fast. I wanted to give you a quick overview of ketogenic diets. And there are lots of them, and a lot of the people will say, well, what's the difference between Atkins or slow carb, or there are differences, and you're going to find there's a lot of different forums out there on Facebook and on the internet that will talk about the differences between these types of diets. One thing I would keep in mind is you need to experiment with yourself to figure out what works for you. Also, one thing to keep in mind is when you're starting any diet, whether it's a low carb or even low calorie, which I don't recommend because I think you have to reduce your calories significantly, and it just ends up being a never-ending cycle. Your body doesn't work efficiently to burn fat. And one thing about low carb, it does efficiently work in your body to burn fat especially when you've got into ketosis. So one thing you want to keep in mind is to always focus on quality food. All right, so what I'm going to go for now, I'm going to post a couple of different links that'll give you information on the different types of food you can eat on low carb. Also on how you can start a ketogenic diet and move forward from there. It will work. The one thing I was just trying to get to is that if you do have sensitivity to some foods, you may want to experiment with yourself and try to figure out, some people may be sensitive to things like eggs or cheese or something like that. So if you find you are sensitive to one or two things, you might want to just not include them in the ketogenic diet. I know it's a little bit challenging, but you need to know your body. You need to be your own personal health advocate. And that's why I'm doing this, is because I want to be an advocate for you and try to give you information that'll help. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just someone who's gone through this process and learned a lot in the period of time, and I want to share it with those out there. So I welcome any comments. If If you really have any questions, I will definitely attempt to answer them to the best of my ability. And thank you for your time. And I hope you are all doing well, and wish you good success with whatever your endeavors are. Have a good day.